Jenna, the Minimalist Doula, and I'm here again with Natalie Meddings, author of How to Have a Baby and Why Home Birth Matters. And we're here to talk about part 2 of How to Have a Baby in Hospital. And what's happened since we last filmed is a few more changes in maternity care. And we're seeing mothers getting obviously quite panicked because of these changes. And what we hope to do with our videos is let you know that actually not much has really changed. And I think when you have a really deep understanding of labour and birth, and maybe some people don't yet, they feel like, the hospital is the main event, the main setting, and all this, the care has changed. But actually, where you spend most of your labour, for everybody, corona or not, is in your home. So we want to talk today about that and being home in early labour. But what we want to talk about is a concept that Natalie told me a good few years ago now, when I first met her in her home on a doula training day, and she shared the beautiful theory of room 1 and room 2, which is a way to look at labour that I think, unless you've met Natalie and maybe read her book, you might not have even heard of. And it's such a beautiful way to consider how you're going to feel in labour. And it's quite different, I think, to traditional sort of antenatal teachings, but much more real. It is how your body responds in labour, isn't it? But I'm going to pass over to Natalie because I want her to talk about it because it's her thing. But it's really fantastic. So Natalie, please share all about room 1 and room 2 for everybody.
Can I preface it by saying, of course, it's not my thing. It's how the body expresses labour, but in the sense I've given it a framework, a scaffolding, yeah. And ironically, I always say to people, it's like I'm becoming a bit, when I explain it, it's a bit of a strange management of labour in the sense. It's like saying, think of it like this, think of it like this. But I'm doing that so that you can relax. It's not a sort of set of instructions or a way in a kind of formal way. It's a way to free mothers up so that they can follow the feelings as they are felt. So it's not about a right way or wrong way. Sometimes I got called yesterday by somebody saying, what I'm worried about is when do I do what? That was the really, she said, like, when do I put my hypnobirthing on? When do I relax? When do I get my ball out? I remember as an active birth teacher when I was training, people used to say, when do I do this position? When do I squat? When do I hang? It's an indication of how back to front it's all got. That we end up thinking there's a pre-prescribed set of, like what's the word? Like a repertoire and as if birth is a stage play, we need to know the lines for or something, rather than what it is, which is a set of feelings. So let's start from the beginning. First of all, it's really exciting for me to be able to use it properly in this context, because it's always my dream. I sometimes even lay there at night going, I just wish people could do it this way and understand it this way. Because I truly believe if we could all understand it this way, you'd see normality rates going through the roof. Yeah. I feel like this is an opportunity, actually, because for women who are facing more fears about where they're going to hospital and they've planned to be in hospital, then actually there is some responsibility here to think, well, actually, I don't want to be in hospital for too long or unnecessarily, too long. And therefore I need to, go to hospital when I'm ready to go. Right, and when the time is right. And also, and I say right, that sounds like a judgment, but you know what I mean, like when I'm ready. Then for people who are have been shocked to discover that they can't maybe have a midwife at home, they also need to have a new plan. So it feels like a big old muddle, but is it? It's not really. If you go back to, as you said, the actual labouring body, your experience of birth. And so I want to help you to understand it from the inside out, and that will give you so much control and so much like a sense of understanding the pathway. So how it works is this. Typically and around the country, around the world actually, people tend to see birth as a sequential trajectory where the birth sort of starts with a strongish, well, first cramps, then more crampy waves, and everyone sort of sees it like this. It builds, it builds, it builds, it builds, and gets ever stronger until a baby comes. Technically, that is what's happening, sort of, but it's very, very blunt instrument, right? And actually, for the mother herself, it's not how she feels it. And it's really how people look at it. And once again, which is why I get driven mad by it, it's like birth being described to women through the observer's eye. And it's that is the most powerful disempowerment. It's so crazy that that we all understand it through how it looks, not how it feels. It does my brain in, right? And so, because then what you get told is, oh, it's gonna, that's why this counting of contractions or the dilation score thing comes in, because it's an ever ascending, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, contractions stronger, 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 and that's not how it feels. It's just not how it feels. And women need to know that. So how I want to explain it to you is absolutely from the perspective of how you are going to feel it. Let me put in a small caveat that there are some exceptions, but they are rare. And maybe there might be time to address them in a bit more detail later. But for the vast majority, the experience of birth is like this. It's like two separate rooms. There's room 1 and there's room 2. The room 1, the first room, as we call it, is the readying space. It's like the anteroom. It's where your body's preparing, where your baby's preparing. And it very much feels like that for the woman. And in that experience, she can feel anything from cramps to crampy waves, even to full-blown contractions that would be classed as contractions. But here's the most important thing. She is not in room 2, i.e. labour. So you've got to think of it as it's almost like us two now. It's like two separate spaces, two separate conditions, two separate feelings. It's and rather than what it's typically understood as, which is this sort of single line of ever strengthening contractions. Once people can separate it into two parts, like I'm in the readying space now, what happens? They relax. They stop watching themselves. They stop second guessing themselves. They stop anticipating the move to hospital. And they just let go to it. Okay, so we need to define for them, and maybe you can help me in a second, of what is room 1, deeply what it is. I'll just start by saying a bit anatomically what it is. The cervix is still at the very beginning of room 1, which is when your baby's just having ideas. It's even, the cervix is still closed and firm, and maybe even pointing backwards. But basically all of room 1 is your body and your baby starting to do this. It's just the baby's massaging and pressing and leaning in and tucking its chin. And the more the baby, I've got a baby here, look. And the more the baby's leaning in and pressing, the more you're feeling those early feelings, first cramps and crampy waves. Now, what defines room 1 as, what makes room 1 so clear for people is in between those contractions, or whatever you want to call them, surges, or they can be even quite strong, is you bob back up. There's space in between that is very noticeable for the mother. She feels not just able to engage, but willing to engage, and will actively make a decision. Like she will still text us as soon as we see it, don't we? There's be a long text. You could get yourself a drink. You would get it, to be honest, even in full-blown labour, you're in charge of yourself, but the difference is you don't want to do anything. But let's just go back to room 1. So you don't act. So in room 1, you just, in between the contraction waves, you just feel very here still, very present tense, very much in your, if that was me giving birth, I'm in my Natalie self. I'm engaging as Natalie, if you see what I mean, or you as Jenna. I'd very possibly ask for something, like can I have a blanket to my partner, or can you get me this, a drink? You might be lying still and doing comfort positions. That's not in question. But am I in labour is what we're talking about. which we're going to set aside for a minute. That's room 2. So room 1, it can be literally anything from early cramps to then crampy waves to then this is the most misleading thing, regular strong contractions. That's the key about room 1. It can be regular strong contractions, but how do we as doulas and how do we teach our mothers to know this isn't labour yet, this isn't labour? It's because in between they're pretty clear. Even during the contraction, they're probably still able to stand and sway. Their whole body is not engaged in a total vigor, total repetitive, locomotive intensity that is like a car on a motorway. There's just no going back. There are no roundabouts now. There are no traffic lights. It's just one way. That's labour. But this earlier room 1 bit, people get misled because they think, oh, the contractions are strong. These are really strong. I must be in labour. Not necessarily. Room 2 is, we're going to save that up. That's when you can feel it's going somewhere. There's directional feeling to it. Room 1, you may well have very, very, very strong contractions, enough that you need to sigh. And you certainly have your eyes closed, and you certainly need to breathe slowly, deeply and everything. And you certainly be swaying, rocking, and you certainly need some comfort, like maybe a bath or a hot water bottle. But the question is, are you in labour? Now, I always feel like we get on people's nerves a lot. Maybe, I don't know. You see a lot of doulas and maybe midwives say, nobody can know. Nobody can know. Some women just don't feel this. It's different for everybody. Do you see that a lot? And I don't know. I mean, I think they might respond differently, but I think and I think that is to hear that as a pregnant woman can be very, not alarming, but it can be a bit, how am I going to know? How will I experience it? Yeah. And so I think it's a shame to miss this opportunity to say that actually most women do feel the build-up part of birth, room 1, mostly the same. Would you say that it might be different time frames, by the way? Some people would have it for a couple of hours. Some people have just been to one for 4 days. And that's what gets muddling, because people tend to do this thing, and can I say this slowly and clearly? People bank contractions. Now, what do I mean by banking? They go, oh, I've been doing this. Let me see. Husbands and partners particularly do this. We've been contracting for 12 hours. It must be labour. There's a lot of that, Yeah. They're banking them. They're mentally thinking, well, we've done our bit. That must mean we need to go in now. And not helped by the fact, of course, the mother may be feeling, it's quite hard, it's tough, and they want to see it as that. But what we need to also look at is if she wasn't second guessing herself and worrying, she probably wouldn't feel so in pain or stressed by it, and she would relax and go, no, clearly I'm not in that bit yet, so I'm going to have a bath, right? So I know I'm taking my chances here, because I think it probably annoys a lot of people when we say, no, you're not in labour yet. And because that's classed as the thing of like somehow I'm taking control and saying, no, I decree you're not. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to get you on the inside of your body to read your body yourself. It is enormously powerful. When Michelle O'Don trained me, and when I was with me in labour, and you've heard her, he says this phrase. He says in a very French accent, he says, "You don't sound like a woman in labour to me." Now he's not judging or just knocking the woman back.
Yeah.
When he said that to me, he said, "You don't sound like a woman in labour to me." Whoa, like that. I felt fantastic. I relaxed. I went, oh yeah, I'm fine. I'll just get it. And of course he was right. The fact that I could actually think to myself, well, it's quite hard actually. I feel really these are strong. But instead I was like, no, I get what he means. I know what he means. He means,
what you guys are doing, like with what he's saying and what you're saying now, is it is such a gift, because you are helping them pace themselves. I mean, if we go from the very first feeling in our body, yes, we're all going to have days and days of labour, and mentally that's just doesn't work. Whereas what happens with room 1 and room 2, you just kind of get rid of like 2 or 3 days of labour, and you're you're home and you're, like you say, you still rest, you might be even having strong contractions, but you're not giving all your mind and energy and attention to your body. So you're not exhausted, you're not mentally exhausted, and you're not physically exhausted. So that's what I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's what I adore about room 1 and room 2. Is the pace. You've just helped them have a shorter labour, mentally and physically, which means they don't get too tired and they're okay, Sorry, go on.
And you're conserving energy, and by having that doorway where you're still in this, very much in the ante-room, very much in the ready room, you don't get caught up in layers of tension. So you're not only are you saving expectation, you're basically pacing your expectation, you're pacing your energy. And of course the very physical and emotional knock-ons of that is you stop watching yourself. Now, watching yourself in birth is the most stressful thing, and it's the reason so many people have long births, because the more onion layers of tension you whack into your body, the more pain it's going to be, the more contractions are going to be less efficient, but not the more less, the contractions are going to be less efficient because they're working against you. You're more resistant, basically. And if you've gone like 10 hours in, and or even 20, a day, through a tricky night, and you're thinking this is it, you will end up by morning like this. Oh, there's all that. You see all that puff. People get really sort of tense. Now, at least 50% of that is a kind of frustration, a kind of edginess. So let me give you an anecdote. I went round. I'm sure she won't mind us sharing her experience. So, I won't say names, but I was round at her house, and she'd had 2.5 days of intermittent, strong contractions, enough that she needed a hot water bottle, and she was getting fed up, right? And by the time I got round there on the second day, she was starting to lose it. But she knows room 1 and she knows room 2 very, very clearly. So I reminded her, I said, well, I think, we're not in labour yet. And I was sort of we're not in room 2. And she went, and she was, I'm going to show you how she was. This was the contraction. Quite short, but she needed to breathe out. Anyway, she was at a kitchen island leaning, and she was rocking and swaying. Over in the corner was her husband frying eggs, right? And bacon, by the way, right? So he was doing this. She said, I know, and she starts getting a bit tearful, right? He then brings the eggs and the bacon over, and he puts it down in front of her. And she just what was happening? A loving gesture. He'd made a beautiful plate of breakfast. She actually did feel quite hungry. Even if she hadn't, I don't think it mattered, because it was such a sweet, he'd laid it out so beautifully. And what it did was it made her see in the spaces, she was clear as a bell, and she was like, oh, yeah, I'm not really, my whole 100% of my body is not engaged in having a baby yet. I clearly can manage a fried egg. It was like she could stop, pick up a knife and fork, cut her own dinner, go like that, and carry on talking. And then 5 minutes later there came another one that was enough boost to it that she had to stand again, lean on her kitchen island, do that, sat down, ate more bacon and eggs. That's room 1. That is not labour. But I put money on it, if she hadn't known and she had having a hospital birth without a doula, she'd have probably gone in at that point, because it was strong enough for her to feel, she's big noises, and but what happened in the 5 minutes in between, she was here, she was now, she was clear, she was totally actually without pain, of course, and she was able to chat to me and her husband and eat her eggs and bacon. So what did she do? She started to laugh, we started to relax, we had a coffee, I had a drink, she let go, and you literally saw her body halve with discomfort, literally halved. She then even had a nap that afternoon, and she didn't go into room 2 till 8 o'clock that night, and it was a very smooth labour. So what she's doing is she's letting go of unnecessary assessment of herself. She's letting go of unnecessary apprehension, anticipation, and watchfulness. You clear your body space. All birth is a clearing of your body. You are literally making room for that baby to start to drop and descend. So much about early labour has become caught up and tense that I think we actually make labours so unnecessarily long, because we do this, you see my body, we go like this, with all the watchful counting and what, you know, I'm in this phase, I'm in state, you know, am I dilating? Rather than what needs to be happening is this. And that letting, total release, some of what we talked about in the first section, that total ease is what allows your baby to go into room 2. You know, it's what allows the body to feel, oh, okay, my owner, my body's, you know, has got this. She's not giving it any unnecessary attention. You know what I mean? So
you can't control that, can you? That's not something you can control. It's the opposite. You have to genuinely let go and just go with your, like you always say that gorgeous expression, follow your feelings. You are following your feelings, you know. And I think what you were saying about the being clear in between contractions, I think that is so powerful, because I know that when I'm talking to my mums and dads about this, or mums and partners, that I always, you know, I demo it. So I do a little, you know, a bobbing. So I get down and I do my, you know, this is you, you're going to come back and you're going to suddenly go, oh, can I have a glass of water? You know, and you come back in the room and you do that a few times. And like you say, you're clear in between, but when you're not clear anymore, well, we will talk about this more, won't we, in room 2, but you just stay there. You close your eyes and you're focused on the rest. You're not coming back up. And I think for dads as well, if they're worried about when to go in, it's such a key thing for dads, isn't it, to be aware of that you know, that idea that they are still clear in between, that they're fine, you know.
Exactly. And actually, can we elaborate there? Really, what I'm so excited about this talk we're having is it gives me a chance to gives us the chance to really nail all those little questions and doubts. And people often say, in response to what you just said, I was talking to the end. Now, you often hear that, don't you? And this is there's 2 misunderstandings about birth. Some people say, oh, when I'm in oxytocin, you know, full oxytocin, I'm in full labor, I will, my mind will go, all this obsession with, I'll let go of my neocortex and I will be, I think people imagine it's a kind of dream state, almost an absence. People talk about words like I retreat into myself. People talk about zones, don't they? You know, I'm inside myself. And the other one, the myth is, the idea that you just don't want to talk, meaning you can't talk, right? Or you can't talk through them is often a question. You can't, a state. Yeah. Because so people imagine it's a state of out of controlness. Now let's clarify this. So in room 2, which we will elaborate more detail later, but it's not that you can't speak. Can we just really stress that? It is not that you cannot verbalize. It is not that you and actually I'm going to go out on the limb here. I don't even think women feel fuzzy. I think actually they feel unbelievably alert. I mean, alert in a way, actually, if you think about it from an evolutionary biology perspective, the infant is about to arrive. From a survival perspective, I don't think human beings are ever more alert than when their baby's about to come. It's not that, it's not cognitive alert. It's not like rational decision-making, adrenaline alert. It's like another level alert. It's like you are on fire. You're absolutely, you don't forget that when you've got a 2 or 3-year-old, let's picture them, sorry, not a very nice analogy, but if they were in danger falling off a climbing frame or running, you would literally throw your body into to protect them, wouldn't you? That's what mother's like in birth. I mean, she will do anything. She is primed and absolutely programmed to protect this child, right? So actually very far from it being this sort of fuzzy, stoned, I'm in labor, that's again the looking like thing. That's what women look like. They look like they're off the planet. They are not off the planet. They are acutely sensitive to which is why they get disturbed by hospital. You know, it's why people get disturbed by. I was at a birth once where a woman went, what's that, and it was the midwife's biro.
I've had that as well, and just pinging up, like from what you say, it looks like they're all over here, and then what was that? They, like you say, it's like an internal alertness, and it's presence, isn't it? Never more present in their whole life, because they're not thinking. They are here in their body, present.
So we don't mean, I think we've got to be careful. The phrase is like, oh, when you're in labour, your mind switches off. People often say, oh, but my mind didn't switch off. My brain did not switch down. No, let's not be missing here. That's not what we're saying. And when we say you won't be talking in labour, we don't mean that either. what we're meaning is, and we'll save this up to analyze it more when we talk about going into the second room, is that your overwhelming urge, like every cell and fiber of your being, is to concentrate on the job in hand. That means there isn't much space to talk. That's all it means. It means there's no desire to speak. There's no desire to engage. Why? Because the beat and pulse of your body is so overwhelmingly intense. There is nothing more in the universe for you in that moment. That's why going, yeah, honey, can you get me a drink? Or, oh, women will drag a blanket on them, or they'll reach for a drink, sort of almost unthinkingly. But to actively go, oh, hi, yeah, you know, when we're doulas, when we're going to hospital with people, what we provide is the continuity of their focus, so they don't have to notice they're getting in an Uber, so they don't have to notice what triage is presenting. That's what we're for as doulas, isn't it? To keep that flow state. So the best way to do, I want to save room 2 up, but labour is a flow state of such deep, profound proportions. You cannot miss it. It is so powerful. And what annoys me about even the concept of stage 1 labour, stage 2 labour, if you think about it, so stage 1 technically is what is taught all around the country in every birth class going, because of Friedman's curve, which taught people that stage 1 labour is not dilation to 10 centimetres dilation. The established part of that, i.e. 4 to 5 centimetres onwards, which is also relevant, but you know what I mean, that very rhythmic time kind of gets lost in, it becomes a bit of an addendum in sessions where people say, oh yeah, labour becomes more and more established, you know, and it becomes more and more rhythmic and it becomes stronger. Well, that's how long is a piece of string, isn't it? What a nightmare to tell women, oh, at some point, vague, is going to get stronger. Well, that's totally subjective. This is why room 1, room 2 works, because it's basically saying to you, like, notice from the inside. So let's go through the ingredients of room 1, if you like. Okay, first of all, I'm going to give you the bad news. Is, as Jenna said, it's an unpredictable time length. There's no way we can know. I was in this from Monday, Tuesday, and through to Wednesday afternoon. I have been with people who had 20 minutes. So it is unpredictable. Why? Because it is dependent on multiple variables: baby's position, mother's emotions, environment, contraction power, the baby's readiness. I mean, multiple things. And what do we know for sure? That mother, the Sarah, Jenna, Natalie, Matilda, whatever, she is still running it, right? So it makes total sense to me that I'm quite an angsty person. I'm quite a kind of careful person. I don't take any risks. It makes total sense to me that my room 1 was really kind of careful. You know, I was really backing into it like a very edgy person, like, you know, and this is the thing, is to understand yourself, that room 1 is very much you know, so you're going to need to resource yourself for that. And if you're a natural kind of, you know, if you are quite an anxious person, then you need to think, okay, how am I going to help myself with this? Because you know, comfort wise, keeping calm wise, other people, they just seem to dive straight in. It's hard, I can't be exacting about it, but the point is it's very much you in the conscious you, right? That's the point, right? The second thing to know about the sensations is, and this is again, I suppose, more bad news, is this is not cramps. That's my other annoyance, is that it tends to get presented as, I ask women over and over again this: what's your understanding of early labour? I hate the phrase early labour, as you know. I literally think it should be banned from the English language. Early labour is the most misleading concept while we continue to have hospital birth. It used to work because we were going to stay at home and then women could understand it. But now people see as early labour is the home bit, labour is the hospital bit, and that gets totally muddled, right? So then people's perception is, oh, early labour is when it's sort of a bit stronger than period cramps. I think that's what they think. So the moment contractions become enough to make you breathe and sigh and lean, of course, people assume that's labour. Room 2, and it's not. And well, it could be, but it most usually isn't. And we're going to explain how you know you're really in labour later. I think you're right that we'll talk about that in the third section, actually. But for the purposes of this chat, we just really want you to get a deep grasp of what to expect. If you know what to expect, you can relax. And if you can relax, here's the great news: You are going to use your homes, your space, your now usefully. And your now will be anything from you wake at 2 a.m. and you've gone to the loo and suddenly you realise that it wasn't the loo that awoken you, it was like this grumbly feeling. And it's a bit intermittent, it's a bit shapeless. That's how it might start. Bit of show maybe, and that can be a bit bloody. And you put a pad in and you'll go back to bed a bit excited. So everyone gets that, that's home. Then it might be that grumbles on through morning, you wake up, it goes off. How many times we as doulas have women phoning us and they go, oh, it doesn't sound right, I don't know, it's all gone off now, oh no. Absolute total waste of time to worry and be frustrated because you're not in labour, you're not in room 2. End of story, go back to your day. Oh, really? Yeah. Don't get it going. I mean, sorry to say, I think even a lot of birth workers start saying march around and do squats. No, you're not in labour. It's like trying to go to sleep at 2 p.m. or something. So forget it. Have your fried eggs. Right. Then it might come back again in the day. On you go. Probably for first time. Well, we can't tell. Everybody's different. But the point is, I think most people tend to understand it can be irregular. But here's the thing that people don't understand is it can be regular. That's the thing that I think is confusing. And when when I became good doula was when I first understood this regular word. You can have contractions on the money every 5 minutes for a long time and still not be in labour. And I'm sure you've seen this, even 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Again, it's this timing thing misleads people. But if in those 3 minute, 5 minute gaps, do you know Liliana, who's my doula, obviously the mother of grandmother doula, she always used to have a little sneaky trick, which is so clever. She just used to say, where are your towels? And if a woman goes, right, so the airing cupboard over there, right, if you go up there, and that's always been my check, right? And I know we're letting this do the secrets here, but what's happening in that moment? Or even like Liliana used to say, could you just remind me, what's the nearest, tell me how to get to hospital or something like that. I mean, you don't even have to go into this detail, but to let you in on this stuff, it's like, because that's how we as doulas do it. We aren't clinical, so we can't check you and assess your vagina, and neither would we want to, and we don't need to. The reason we can sit there comfortably knitting in the corner is all the while we know you're telling us where your airing cupboard is, or now it is true that even in deep labour a woman will be able to tell you stuff, but let me show you what she would do. When I tried to get a pair of knickers, have you ever done this? And I say, where's your knicker drawer? And she's in really full labour. This is what she'll look like. Isn't it? That's when you're in, that's the level. Why is she not? She could, and eventually she'll get there and explain to me where her knickers are, but it'll be an annoyance for her. It'll be something that she's not wanting to give any energy to. Whereas a woman in room 1 has still got clarity to a point. Let's think, what other things can you add in, like what your observations of room 1, the feelings?
I think the thing about room 1 is, I always think, like, I like to use the word normality, which you've always taught me as well, that everything's just normal. And in terms of how you're feeling, I think it's very much what we've spoken about the engagement that you have around the room. Like when you say she doesn't, it's like, what I think it is you've shed your ability to give a shit a bit. That's room 2, because in room 1, she's trying to please you by answering where her knickers are. She's, she's like, oh, I must be polite, and Natalie needs to know, and I must get this right, and da-da-da. And then in room 2, suddenly she's like, oh, this stuff actually, lo and behold, doesn't matter where my knickers are. She'll figure it out in a minute. I'm busy, and I'm going to think about myself and my body, and I'm concentrating. I think it's room 1, you're not yet, you haven't yet shed those layers. You're still, you're still thinking, it's the awareness, self-awareness of your own self, like in that space. Whereas when you're in room 2, you don't have that self-awareness. You are now with your baby.
I love the word busy. That's it, the word. Because in Grantley Dick Reed's book, Childbirth Without Fear, do you remember there's the famous encounter with the woman in the East End tenement, and she's in labour and he keeps trying to give her chloroform. And eventually she just knocks him, she just looks up and she says, "Can't you see I'm busy?"
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is a woman in labor, a woman in womb 2, is busy with her body. Yeah. She's busy at a level you can't even imagine. It's as busy as if you would imagine saying to somebody in the middle of the night sleep, "By the way, could we plan tomorrow?" You know, the woman is deep in her body asleep, and that's it, that it looks like a sleep even, and she's in a deep intense internal space. That's very, very different from, you know, when we judge it by contraction strength or contraction regularity or dilation scores. These are all quite abstract, they don't mean anything to the woman, but if you give her the tools to understand that either she's in it or she's not in it, she will save so much energy, as will the partner. Because now the partner will sleep, and how many men, when you give them this empowerment, or partners, they will go off and cook a meal because they get it. Oh, right, I can relax. Whereas I bet you anything, as we're on this call right now, there'll be people all over the country with dads stood over a woman in room 1, timing the contractions, writing them down in a little pad. I'm not knocking it. I get why, because they're anxious, but the woman's on the ball, he's sitting next to her, he's watching her. Every time someone's anticipating the next wave, what that becomes is much more, is pain, in the sense, is given a more of a headline. You know, what's that phrase? I heard from an anaesthetist once that in doctor school they get told pain is what the patient says it is. And that's interesting from our perspective, because, so in other words, it's a personal experience. Well, there you have it, right? If you're basically going, "Things have begun, you know, labor is underway, I'm going to count my pains." Could there be anything more counterproductive than counting pain? You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. Whereas if you don't, and instead your husband's giving you fried eggs, that Matthew who did that, I literally could have kissed him, because he put it down with such ceremony, and and he went like that, "Let's have a fry up," you know, and he like rubbed his hands, and he's like that, and he's in with his sausages. She just was like, "Oh, well, they're not bothered, and I'm not bothered," and she wasn't bothered. You know what I mean? And she was like, "All right," and she spent the rest of the day very happy, thanks. You know what I mean?
With the oxytocin element, I always say to my mums, I'm like, well, oxytocin is super shy. You know, it's just shy. So why don't stare at it? Don't stare it down. Don't stare it down and make it go. Yeah. You know, you've got it. It's like you're tricking your own body. You're almost like looking away and going, "Oh, I know you're doing something, but I don't really know what you're doing." And you've got to look the other way, the opposite, haven't you?
Yeah, and counting contractions in that obvious, am I in labour? When is labour? How is it happening? Make it happen. Is literally, there must be, every woman in this country must know the feeling of trying to go to sleep. You know, whether it's because you had a flight in the morning or you've got something worrying you and you think, "I've got to get to sleep, I've got to get to sleep." There is nothing more agitating in all the world than trying to sleep. And exactly what the way birth is done now, telling women that they've got to sort of move it along, am I in labour, let's count contractions, is simply like trying to sleep, you know. And as we know, with the standard sexual analogy in birth, it's like trying to have an orgasm or trying to fancy somebody, like we said last time. I mean, you can't try.
You can't force it. No, you can't.
I mean, birth is like a desire state. It's like a longing. It's that you have to work as it unfolds in you. So if we're basically giving you this space in order to leave yourself out of all that expectation, let your body go, and then the trick is to follow what actually is happening. Now, what will happen in terms of sensation is you are still going to feel something come into your body, and it's not from outside, it is you know, a wave of gathering up that is actually very female, very swelly, very normal feeling. As one woman said to me once, "Why does nobody tell you it's familiar?" You know, it's not some external pain that's come to do something to you. It feels very, very normal, actually. So it comes in, and here's the news. Oh, and it goes again, right? Just let it come in, let it go out. And then in the meantime, those spaces that are there for you, you know, I mean, everyone talks box sets. I've become personally like driven mad by the not box sets, what do you call it? I've got my playlist or my box sets, you know, this, and I think it becomes a very sort of cheesy way to approach early labor, because everyone thinks, oh, I'll just watch my funny films and I'll just play my lovely music. Now, there's no denying that music can be incredibly comforting and distracting, absolutely, as can a funny film, as can your favorite film. But if you've literally got it, I find it's a bit like, is that normal, or is it an affected choreograph normal? Sitting at 2 p.m. to watch 6 episodes of something, is that normal? It's not that normal, is it? To spend all day listening to tracks from your life is kind of a bit eerie, actually. So I would say, what were you planning to do? Doesn't mean you don't use that, to say the evening comes and you're almost bored or something, but to sort of sit down in this very structured way that it's taught, like, oh, get your box sets, get some distractions. Are your distractions fake distractions, or are they genuinely, I fancy listening to X, Y, or Z, or, so you've got to move organically through room 1 in an fried eggs sort of way, just, is it breakfast? Yes, it's breakfast. Is it a walk time? Yeah, let's go for a walk. Actually, I fancy a nap. Oh, I want to go through my baby clothes again. I had a very anxious woman this week, and we thought of a really nice thing to do to add in to what we did on the first film, was that she was, so I found it really soothing today getting all my baby's clothes ready. And an old Italian granny taught me once how to, when I used to travel, we went in this big van traveling around Europe, and had all these clothes, and she taught me how to iron with my hands. And basically you warm your hands like this, and you smooth out your baby clothes, right? And so she was just smoothing out, and so imagine the little baby grow, and you just smooth it out and layer them and all this kind of thing. Well, that's a kind of lovely thing to do in room 1. You can lean and sway and breathe, and you're rocking, do your thing. It's past, go back to my baby clothes. It's that kind of thing. But let's add in here, eventually, and we know this, don't we, as doulas, the box set will be bloody annoying, as will the sound, and you're still in room 1. You know what I mean? It'll just be like, oh, I don't know, you don't know what to do with yourself, but you're still not in labor. That's where people get unstuck. And that is about, if I'm looking at it anatomically, you're probably 2 to 3 centimeters. It's starting to feel strong. And I call that person 3 centimeter woman, because what she does is she usually goes to hospital at this point. Most people say, absolutely normal urge to go to hospital. I get it totally. It's starting to get its boots on. And quite instinctively and naturally, according to midwifethinking.com, she says, you're going to the place where you want to have your baby. So it's totally natural. This is really important for our corona setting, right? It is totally natural. It's not wrong to go to hospital. It's not, oh, I went too early. There is no too early. You've gone because you want to feel safe, right? And what's happening is you're starting to feel the contractions have booth. The problem is the hospital is not there to accommodate this period. And if they do a check on you and they find you're 2 to 3 centimeters, which is strong and rhythmic and repetitive, and it feels like, well, this is full on. But I put money on it, you'll be bobbing up in between. I put money on it, when you get in that cab, you'll feel a bit of spacing out and then becoming a bit slower. I put money on it that you could very easily stand like this from a contraction. Now, a woman in room 1 could easily do this. A woman in room 2 could not do this. You have to be close to the floor. 99% of women would need to lean on something or hang on something or be down low. To stand free with a baby that's now descending is very hard. So that's another good measure, right? But she's now gone in. Now, here's the great opportunity of corona. is that you have to think again. Now, please don't think we are unsafely telling you not to go to hospital. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we're going to explain what you're going to be feeling with the next section, but don't go by contraction strength or go by, I suppose we can't make this make sense until we've talked about room 2, but basically, if you may feel it's picking up pace, but if you are still bobbing up in between, and if you would have, the best thing is to have a bath, actually. If you have a bath and it changes in rhythm, you've probably got a couple, not long, probably just a couple more hours, but it is worth staying put for that. So I'm not saying suck it up, put up with it, don't go. In fact, if anything, call labour ward and talk to them, or call your doula, or call someone. They'll give you guidance. We're not saying don't go to hospital, but what we're saying is the whole point of the problem at the moment is people want to be in hospital for as least time as possible. Yeah. So we are hoping with this session that we're going to teach everyone, how to do room 1, room 2 will help you, corona or non-corona.
Yeah.
It's basically saying, check in with yourself. Do you really need to leave as yet? Speak to a midwife, speak to a doula, and relax into it. And just basically, there is a point just before you go into labour that feels a bit boofy, and you're a bit like, oh. If you think of it from this way, if your body's gearing up to drop into a deeply intense state. If you throw at it taxis, street, triage, people in masks, stressful setting, at that very, very, very sensitive moment, that pivot point, it's going to stop and slow down probably, because you're not really in labour yet. So it's even more important that people understand that if you are going to go to hospital, you need to go when things have established. So I think we'll have to do that in the third section, to go to much more detail about what that feels like. But hopefully we've kind of given a deeper understanding. I feel like, what else could we add about the feelings?
I just wanted to say a couple of things about going in as well, because something I always say to my mums is, if you're unsure, it's not time. Because I find if they start to say something like, I think I want to go in, or I feel like I might want to go in, and I'll say, oh, should we try a bath, or whatever, do you really want to go in? Often they're like, I don't know. But when they actually truly want to go and have their baby, there is no shadow of a doubt. They just are so in the zone, and they just suddenly go, we're going in. It's not even a question, it's we're going. And they are so sure. So I always feel like they know. When they're unsure, maybe they're feeling, that 3 centimetre change. They're feeling things and thinking, oh, it's feeling bigger, I want to go. But then they're still not sure. But I do find when they're sure, you know it, and we go.
And we're going to explain that, aren't we? In the last film, we'll explain why are those women sure. This is the great big magical key that we're going to teach you, which is, why are they sure? They're sure because you cannot miss a baby in your that's descending through your pelvis, that's filling your pelvis. You can't miss it. And I know that sounds a bit nuts and boltsy, like I'm talking mechanics, but in the sense, there is a fair bit of mechanics. It is the baby's burrowing now. In early labour, you are not feeling changes. You are feeling intermittent waves. You're feeling very strong waves. Are you feeling a baby coming down and through? No. And I think if people can understand, it is you from the inside know that. No amount of hands exploring, the cervix, no amount of counting of apps is going to tell anyone more clearly than you now know. You're the one that will know. In fact, we'll talk about it more clearly. In case I forget, I will literally act this out. I got to hospital for my first baby, and I happened to have a gas. I did love gas and air the first time, and they had a movable canister, and I was dancing it. I was dancing with it like I was in a disco, like a slow dance, cuddling it like this. Wouldn't be parted like this. So I happened to be vertical with gravity. So I'm like, oh yeah, this. Anyway, I can remember now, 20 years on, whatever, this incredible change. Now that I was 5 centimeters. It doesn't matter what, I hate numbers anyway, it's irrelevant. But the point is, I was moving into room 2 big time. And I remember going like this. I looked up and I went, what's that? I just remember going, what's that? It's really weird that I can remember it. And the midwife laughed. She was such a good midwife. And she just laughed and she went, sounds like progress to me. And I went, and I remember that something, and I went, like, hang on, that's my baby. And she was like, that's how it feels. And it was what was happening is just to show you, if a cervix is now coming to be soft and so thin and stretchy, my baby's coming through. Can you see my hand? So what I'm feeling is that. So that makes, can you hear it? See?
Yeah, we can see.
You're starting to feel the bulge of it, the kind of filling up feeling. That's labour. Now, I had been for 3 days, I had strong contractions on and off. But I somehow, I don't know how I got lucky, because I didn't know anything at that time, but I sort of knew it wasn't labour. I just sort of knew, because it didn't change. I did have strong contractions every 5 minutes for long periods, but I knew it wasn't birth happening, because she wasn't, as in my child, was not burrowing down. You know, we're going to talk more about that. But so when you say you just know, we're not talking about fluffy instinct. We're talking about boof. You know, you can't miss it. You can't miss it. We probably should end there. I'm just trying to think. I feel like I'm wondering if I should I just look in. So all of this is in How to Have a Baby.
Yeah, have you got it there? I've got mine here. Look, I think we should show it. Double up. The best book in the world. It is though. But can I just in your room 1 and room 2? Yeah.
I'm just going to see.
Are you going to read?
I'm just going to maybe read a little bit. Hang on. Okay, maybe a bit of description. Shall I read it?
Yeah, go for it.
In the first room, things may start with cramps. The drag to the cramps will get heavier and heavier, becoming gentle waves, and in time, proper strong contractions. Unlike active labour, or room 2, as we're going to discuss, which can unfold formulaically when the body is getting what it needs, this build-up bit is often unpredictable. It can be a few hours for some, a day or even 2 for others, which is why you need a plan. So that's why we're telling you this, because it's going to help you to relax. It will be easy to dismiss irregular cramping, but as soon as there is a marked rise, peak, recede to the feelings, and enough that it gives you pause and leaning is necessary, you know, it's tempting to go into gear and to label this as labour and start the clock. Plenty of couples start burning candles at this point, or close curtains, or create a zone. But using the L word before it's time sets the stage too early. All that watching yourself equates to a kind of holding your breath. By circling on balls and keeping partners home and calling doulas that early, you've announced get, set, go. And it will be hard to go back on that and recover precious energy once you have. A more productive approach is to save your focus for when those feelings are non-negotiable, for when you enter the second room and there is no choice but to concentrate. So we're going to save that up for the next time, but just you know, we want to think of it as, I hate analogies to sport myself, but that thing about don't sprint at the start of a marathon, I mean, it is quite a good one for this. It's like you would not, don't forget your expectations are about 70% of the energy. And if you are overusing your expectations and you're like a straining, you know, racehorse, isn't it? It's a nightmare. You can't do it like that. You have to just be where you are, relax your body, get a hot water bottle, have a nice breakfast, take a walk, knit, do clothes, watch telly, listen to music, chat to a friend, eventually go and lie down and have a radio on in the background. You know, I don't mean that I don't always want to give the impression you can distract yourself. Sometimes I was with a woman once, and from 10 in the morning till 6 at night, she did stay in her dark bedroom. But why did she? Because she had a lovely radio. She had radio on, which she loved, Desert Island Discs, and she loved listening to the radio. So she was resting. She did have the curtains open sometimes, but she ate, she drank. So we don't necessarily mean the keep going bake cakes thing. Yeah. It might be that, but it also might be that you are in a little nest. That's fine. Have a bath for 2 hours. I remember one woman years and years ago got in the bath at 9 o'clock and got out at 12 o'clock. Yeah, so I don't mean, and she was as wrinkly as anything. That worked for her. It doesn't matter what you do, but it has to be not what you should do, it's what you feel like doing, isn't it?
Always, yeah. Like you say, follow your feelings. Always follow your feelings. But I think, should we leave it there? Yeah. And then we will come back for room 2, which I can't wait now. I'm like, I can't wait to talk about room 2. Yeah, it does make another baby. But yeah, thank you, Natalie. That is just awesome.
All right.
Yeah, we'll be back soon. Bye.